Quick, I want you to think about something in reflection of what Bert was saying. We're told that that we have Republicans that think that our machines are safe, that our machines are sound, that are all over America, that, why would we go back to the Stone Age and do hand-marked paper ballots and all that other stuff? And they don't realize, how they say, oh, it's inefficient to have paper ballots. Well, in reflection of what Bert said, remember there's a news story about a year ago that our Department of Motor Vehicles database is broken into. Do you all remember that? So if the same people that are telling us, the same elected officials, are telling us that we're crazy for thinking that the machines can be hacked into, but the Department of Motor Vehicles was still hacked into, meanwhile, Emergency Act for our voting machines, our election process is still in place. There's a problem there that they can get into our machines. And one last thing to think about. When someone tells you that our machines cannot be hacked into, remind them, say, have you ever heard of credit card theft? Have you ever heard of your identity being stolen? Has your checking account ever been hacked into? Title theft. Well, if all of these things can be done digitally, don't you think there might be somebody in this world that might want to hack into our elections and steal and hack into and control the most vulnerable thing that's holding our constitutional republic together? Our next guest is someone that's been out on the trail. I've seen him everywhere. He is out there not only fighting for election integrity, but he is a master at all of the information that's needed to be able to not only disseminate this information properly, but he's extremely good at getting it and articulating it, and you're going to appreciate that with Russ. Randy, thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. And it's a pleasure to be here this Saturday. I got the lunchtime slot, so I took a nap when my friend Bert was speaking. Just kidding. It's great to be with you. I've been away from the movement a little bit. My church called me earlier this year to serve as their pastor, so I've been getting a new church startup and doing all that at my old age. But what I wanted to do is tell you, after 4 years, many of us, some of you in this room, we began to work on November 5th, 2020, on what we saw, which was 5 cities in Democrat-controlled states and cities stopped counting. And the count went on for days, it went on for weeks, and we didn't have a result until 3 weeks later, 4 weeks, in Atlanta, in Georgia. And yet we were told that electronic voting systems, the purpose was to have secure, fast, accurate, auditable results. And what we've learned in 4 years is these systems are neither fast, they're not accurate, and they're not auditable. So the very promise that was made to us has not been fulfilled. What is even more troubling to us as we look around the country and we talk to our associates, other people in the election integrity movement, is at the federal, the state, and the local level, our elected representatives and public servants that we pay are not interested in transparency, they are not interested in accountability, and they're not interested in accuracy of election results. How do we know that? I'll give you one example. In January of last year, 2023, we brought confirmed evidence of 600,000 ineligible voters on Louisiana voter rolls to the Attorney General's office privately and met with 3 attorneys. 600,000. In April, Nancy Landry and Sherry Hatsky admitted that there were 183,000 potentially ineligible voters on the rolls. So John Scanlon and I, who were businessmen formerly, when you have agreement that there's an issue and you have two different numbers, you do what? You negotiate. We were at 600,000, the state was at 183. Let's negotiate and get these voter rolls cleaned up before the 2023 election. Sounds logical, right? Sounds accountable, right? Sounds transparent, right? We went to the Attorney General's office and asked to negotiate. Our attorney contacted their guy. Crickets. So we filed suit in the 19th Judicial District with locked up, ironclad evidence of these 600,000 people by name, by address, by voter ID number. We went up against 7 state attorneys, 5 from the Attorney General's office and 2 outside attorneys hired by the Secretary of State. Now I ask you, what does it mean when citizens bring evidence of ineligible voters in violation of state and federal law? This is a clear violation of the law. And citizens like you and like us are fought with 5 state attorneys from the AG's office who represent registrar voters and 2 attorneys from the Secretary of State. Friends, I hate to say it, but many people in our government at the federal, state, and local level are either incompetent, corrupt, or compromised, and they are being coerced and threatened to do the things that we see them do. Let me say it again. Our summary after 4 years and thousands of hours of research, analysis, meeting with people all around the country is our government is a criminal enterprise. These people are incompetent, corrupt, compromised, or coerced. It's the only logical explanation for why school boards do the exact opposite of what the citizens they want done. And we see citizens being arrested in school board meetings for simply speaking out and saying, I don't want pornography in my child's elementary school. Or showing up at an board of election supervisors meeting in other states and saying, I got some questions about these elections. I don't think they're legitimate. This just happened recently this week. A woman was taken out by the sheriff. Incompetent, corrupt, compromised, coerced. That's our conclusion. The state government of Louisiana has fought us tooth and nail. We've tried to be reasonable, evidence-based, bringing it to the proper authorities. And our conclusion is that they're either incompetent, corrupt, coerced, or being threatened. You got it? Okay. I'm a former college professor, so I repeat stuff. So where are we now? The suit that we filed last year, so we were forced to file this suit. Folks, you know, legal cases cost tens of thousands of dollars. And we're paying for all of this all of our work has been out of our own pockets. We have not asked for money, we don't raise money. Good people around the state fund everything out of our pocket. And our time is not paid for. We're all volunteers. We filed suit in May of last year on this voter registration issue 2023. That suit was heard in the 19th Judicial District Court, and it was dismissed based on standing. Citizens in Louisiana do not have standing to question voter registration or election law. Let me say that again. Citizen registered voters in East Baton Rouge Parish, I was a party to the suit. I do not have standing in the court of Louisiana, 19th Judicial District, to question voter registration accuracy. Let that sink in for a minute. The very people that the system is supposed to be for, to hear our voices, I lack standing. Which means, who else lacks standing? All of you. So who is this government representing? Who are these legislators? Kathy was here earlier. I'm not talking about Kathy specifically, but who do these legislators represent? Who do these school boards represent? And why do they not do the will of the people who elected them? It's because many of them, in fact, probably most of them, in fact, possibly all of them were not elected. Because we have a system that is totally corrupt. If you don't believe me, pay attention to what's happening in Western North Carolina. Do you think our government cares about the people anymore? I talked to a good friend of mine who lives up the mountain from Burnsville. He and I have met together for Bible study for 15 years. Every week, Friday morning, he was out last week because of the storm. I finally caught up with him yesterday. He said, it appears as though the government is intentionally not helping citizens in need. And it just so happens to be a red place, the whole path of the storm, which those of us in Louisiana, that's a weird storm. I've never seen one like that. I'm 67 years old. I lived through Betsy, Andrew, Katrina, bunches of storms as you did. So, you must accept the fact that our government at all levels is an ongoing criminal enterprise. Ongoing criminal enterprise. We also spoke at Rockable in 2 years ago in July, or no, in October, 2 years ago, just 2 years ago. I was there. Many of you were there. And I had been doing research on the censorship enterprise case, the Missouri, Louisiana versus Biden, Homeland Security, CISA, the regulator of election systems, and the Election Assistance Commission. At that point, we didn't know a whole lot other than the state governments had sued the federal government for setting up a censorship enterprise. We now know that that is all true, and we have emails that were discovered very recently that our Secretary of State at the time, Kyle Ardoin, was turning in Louisiana citizens to be censored, sending emails from his office to the FBI and CISA and the Department of Homeland Security. That's a fact. We have the emails. So our state government is involved in a federal state criminal enterprise to violate the civil rights of you and me. I spoke in Homa about a year ago, and it was 50 people in a little seafood bar. It was filmed and put up on Facebook. The host called me the next day or texted me and said they've censored the post, and I was called a bully and an intimidator. Y'all who know me know that, you know, I'm a tough guy, right? Look at me. How is it that Facebook knew within 24 hours that a little guy, a little 60, whatever, a 66-year-old guy, speaking to 50 people in a South Louisiana Bayou Country seafood bar. How did they know? And guess what I was talking about, coincidentally? Censorship. So we did a little sting operation. Y'all remember that was during Brandon Trostler's campaign. I can say this now. We cut that video into 5 parts, and we took my name off of it. We took my name off of it. Guess what happened? It didn't get censored. You see, folks, I'm on a list, and you might be too. And that's a scary thing, to be in a supposedly free country when our government, federal, state, and local, has me on a list. I have been a loyal American citizen for 67 years. Never been arrested, had a couple traffic tickets like most of us, paid my taxes, and yet I'm on a list. I'm a domestic terrorist. That's what they're doing to our country. So where are we at right now? Well, we never give up. We keep fighting. And even though we've lost at every turn, like George Washington early in our revolution, this Friday, the 11th, we have a hearing in the 19th Judicial Court to challenge for the first time in the history of Louisiana the constitutionality of our election system. I call it our digital elections infrastructure, or DEI for short. Y'all got it? DEI. You see, DEI puts people into positions that they're not qualified for. Our election system puts people into office that they were not elected to. And we see it all around us. This Friday, the suit is Calais versus Secretary of State Nancy Landry and Commissioner of Elections Sherry Hadsky, and none other than Sergeant Philip Burke Calais, who's in the room, is the plaintiff. We're getting smarter as we figure this out. We spend lots of money and time. So we learned from our suit with the voter registration suit from last summer, 2023. So John Scanlon and I brainstormed and talked to some people, and we said, we got to overcome this standing issue, which is what they've done nationwide. This is a nationwide, centrally controlled strategy by the bad guys. Knock them out on standing. Bert is a Board of Election Supervisor. You just heard his talk. The Board of Election Supervisors sign off on the election results. It is their exclusive power and responsibility to review and certify the counting of the ballots. What does the Constitution say? In Section 11?
Article 11.
Pardon?
Article 11, Section 2.
Article 11, sorry. Article 11, Part 2. It says these words, ballots shall be counted publicly. You've heard me talk about this before. So we have a very simple lawsuit that challenges our existing system because we don't have ballots unless they're the early voting absentee ballots, which about 10% of our vote goes through there. So where's the ballot? The purpose of a ballot, in case you are not aware, is the ballot is cast secretly so that it can be counted publicly. The ballot is cast secretly so it can be counted publicly. We don't want anybody knowing how we vote, our employer, my wife, or whatever. so we won't be threatened, coerced, or whatever. So the ballot, historically for hundreds of years, a paper ballot was cast in secret so that a group of citizens in that precinct could count that ballot. Ballot shall be counted publicly. Right now, 90% of our votes go through black box software. Patented, proprietary, third-party vendor software by a Canadian company domiciled in Toronto, Dominion Voting Systems, with a software office in Serbia, Eastern Europe. That's not a conspiracy theory. It was just testified with evidence in a court, federal court in Georgia this week. And those offices in Serbia are connected to voting systems throughout the country and are transmitting data back and forth. That's not speculation. It's in the court record in Georgia. Shall be counted publicly. Because we use black box proprietary software that no one can inspect, your ballot and mine is not public and it's not counted publicly. Thirdly, the Constitution says the ballot shall be held inviolate, meaning that they should be retained until all disputes are resolved. The case in Caddo Parish is important because what the citizens learned is there was no record that could be audited or recounted except for the 10%, more or less, of paper ballots that were the absentee ballots. So our own judicial system and Secretary of State's office had to admit that our elections are not auditable and we cannot conduct recounts. And that's in the court record. Caddo Parish, Whitehorn versus, I forgot who the other guy was. So this case is going to the trial judge Friday. And it's very simple. We don't have ballots. They're not held. They're not counted publicly by citizens of the parish and precinct. And thirdly, there is no record that is inviolate because the little cartridges and the thumb drives are erased after 10 days or so. They're erased and reused. That's why they couldn't recount Caddo. So the solution was to run another election for Caddo Sheriff on the very same system. Insanity, my friends, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And William, if I have time, I'll take some questions. Connie.
Randy, one of the things that drove me crazy about that Caddo Parish election was the fact that the news media totally reported it every single time that, oh, there's been a recount, implying that the entire election was recounted. They never said one time that it was just the absentee ballots. We knew.
Yeah, this is part of the subterfuge that our elected and appointed and local officials engage in. That they gaslight us, which is a nice way. Which is a nice way of saying they lied to us. The truth is, less than 10% in a regular election has paper, absentee. Those can be hand counted, but guess what they did in Caddo? They run them back through the same scanners that go into an election management server in the clerk of court's office, and it is transmitted, wait for it, over the internet to the Secretary of State's office.
So nobody ever hand counted those absentee ballots?
No, but listen to how slick they are. We recounted the ballots.
Yeah.
Less than 10% or what, I think it might have been 20%. The point is, it wasn't a recount. and it wasn't all the ballots because 80% of the ballots didn't exist anymore. So they're lying to us.
At least y'all are good company because they said Trump didn't have standing either.
The President of the United
Trump
States.
doesn't have standing, yeah. And,
Both of his cases were
and
dismissed.
this, so listen to how perverted this is. Citizens do not have standing to challenge laws in our court system. Folks, that is why we fought the first revolution.
Right.
Is just this reason. We fought the first revolution because people were put in jail, falsely accused and held without trial for months and even years, and that's happening to our fellow citizens right now, the J6ers and others. And I could go on and on, but you know. Other questions?
So, Randy, do you see this as the federalization of our election processes in a top-down fashion? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, Barack Obama said in his first term that his goal was to fundamentally transform the American system. Okay? So communists centralize everything. I worked in higher education the last 12 years of my career after 30 years in business. I'm a professor of marketing. So one of the things they did is they eliminated all the private student lending operations and federalized that. Notice how they're using that weapon or that tool to buy votes. They centralized it. Now it's a way to bribe people. Oh, all you kids that got degrees in white, bald, middle-aged male studies. That's a joke. I make jokes about myself. That's why I'm not a comedian. Worthless degrees. Our children are getting worthless degrees. They're being brainwashed in college, and the costs are going through the roof. Oh, we're your government. We care about you. We're going to forgive you those Ivy League loans, 50, 100, 200,000. Folks, why do we send people to college and load them up with loans that they can't repay? Well, there's a reason. It's part of fundamentally transforming the United States of America, because if they're dependent on the government and they have to beg for relief from the debt, the government has them. Healthcare. Remember Obamacare? That was a pure grab to centralize all of healthcare. And it flowered, it bloomed during the COVID hoax. You notice how you couldn't get off-label medicines? Couldn't get ivermectin, couldn't get it, because it was centralized. On January 6th, this is the most important January 6th. Thank you for the question, John. On January 6th, 2017, 14 days before the Obama-Biden administration left office, Barack Obama signed an executive order making election systems in this country critical infrastructure. Just like the nuclear plant I live near in West Feliciana Parish. What that meant was elections became federalized under the jurisdiction and authority of the Department of Homeland Security. Have you heard of it? Alejandro, the borders are secure, Mayorkas. And now he's Alejandro, we don't have no money to help American citizens, Mayorkas. So that then put CISA in play, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and our own Kyle Artman, Secretary of State, was the Government Coordinating Council chair to coordinate all of these election cybersecurity activity. We published an article in the Gateway Pundit a year, 2 years ago now, a little over 2 years, in which Kyle is on tape saying that one of his proudest achievements was working with federal and state partners, secretaries of state around the country, and CISA to combat misinformation and disinformation. Let me translate that for you. I'm really proud that we developed a system to censor American citizens who we disagree with. And I have said, and many of you have heard me say this, I've been saying it for over 3 years, or over 2 years, I used to say if they can censor our voices. Now I say, if they are censoring our voices, what about our votes? Because these are the same people that control all this technology. Right now, and many of you have heard this, and this is documented, every parish in Louisiana has what's called an Albert sensor sitting on the server in the clerk of court's office. What is an Albert sensor? It's a monitor behind the firewall that is monitored by a 501c3 vendor of the Department of Homeland Security, wait for it, called the Center for Internet Security. Now, our systems aren't connected to the internet. They're not connected to the internet. The vaccine is safe and effective. It's safe and effective. Borders are secure. Borders are secure. The Center for Internet Security, 31 Technology Way, East Greenbush, New York, monitors every county election system in the country. It's a 501c3, outsourced monitoring from DHS, and oh, by the way, the Center for Internet Security is in a business park next door to the Center for Global Cybersecurity. What that is, that's a World Economic Forum funded nonprofit. Got the picture? So right now, elections throughout the country are being monitored to protect citizens, kind of like the citizens in Western North Carolina are being protected by the government, or the citizens in Maui, we've forgotten that one, are being protected by the government. They're selling us convenience and protection. Oh, we're going to make it easy for you to vote. You can vote, you can take 60 days to vote, you can mail it in, you can do a touch screen. It was all fake. And so the truth is, at the federal, state, and local level, we all have been lied to for decades. And many of those folks, particularly at the local level, have drunk the Kool-Aid. They're simply repeating what they've been told. Because guess who's done all the training? Kind of like the pharma industry has captured the medical schools, the voting system industry, and the federal government have captured local election officials and state election officials. Much of that training that they get is funded by the voting system vendors. And the Harvard Belfer Center and other nonprofits funded by people that you would recognize their names who are not for us. So, the gentleman in the back had a question?
Well, I was just going to ask a question, I guess. The whole point of the thing is that they're going to basically, i.e. the immigration situation, they basically want a one-party country.
They want a one-party country, and the way you get that, we already know this, almost 4 years ago now.
But let me add.
Go ahead.
Let me add that, so you know this is somewhat of this is news for me, but I get the whole general Republican, elected Republican officials somewhere in this country, maybe Steve Scalise for one, why doesn't they come up and say similar things and sound an alarm as you are?
They're either incompetent, corrupt, compromised, or coerced. The whole system is rotten to the core.
Just one.
The whole.
A patriot somewhere. working in the
I'll give you an example. Madison Cawthorn, former congressman of North Carolina, he outed the Washington elites for the sex parties that they have and the child trafficking going on in the nation's capital. That's all breaking right now. As you know, Madison did that 3 years ago or more. They go after you with a vengeance, and they threaten you, they threaten your family. This is a mafia we're dealing with. I don't care.
Speaking of mafia, speaking of which, I don't know, and I haven't looked into it really closely, but there's a former mob guy, Michael Francis. He's got a book out called Mafia Democracy. And he essentially is saying that he was a former mobster. He's saying that the federal government is essentially run like a mob
It's a
organization.
fact. So whenever someone raises their head, they get whacked, and they get told, if you keep this up, something bad's going to happen to you.
People have been killed. I mean, remember when Pulitzer first started with the paper? Remember when people have been killed? Remember when Pulitzer first started with the objections to the paper? Remember his team was killed? You also may have seen in Arizona the cartels, the drug cartels run Arizona, and they killed him.
It's dangerous business to fight the deep state. My family's been in this country since the 1630s. They've fought in every war. My dad fought in the Pacific and in Europe to within 50 miles of Berlin. I know where I'm going when I'm dead. And so they can't hurt me because my soul and my body are eternal. But many people are fearful. My whole family are believers too. If they kill us all, we'll be together. So what can they do? But that these people are ruthless. And I think I'm done. One more. Kelly.
I have a few quick questions about the trial. So, we have standing in this trial?
The hearing on Friday, Bert Calais, if Bert Calais as a Board of Election Supervisors constitutional officer does not have standing, the entire state government and the court judicial system cannot be relied on. If a You see what can happen? So on Friday, we expect for a standing ruling to be given, number one. Number two, we expect, hopefully, that the arguments will be heard. We have two national expert witnesses. You would recognize their names because they're prominent in the various states, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona. These are guys that are at the top of the game that will be testifying for our side. And so we're hoping that the arguments will be heard Friday, but you never know.
Essentially find out if they have standing.
On Friday, we expect at a minimum to have the standing question answered. We're hopeful that we will be able to present our case, which is very short. The filing is 4 or 5 pages, so it's simple. It's a simple constitutional challenge which has never been done since 1974.